Hello, friends. I'm Harry. Here we breathe life into letters left unread, wartime confessions, secret farewells, stolen moments of passion. Lean in and let these voices from another era speak directly to your heart. Lost letter. Your piano still plays, though my fingers have forgotten. This letter was discovered in 1991 during renovation of the Leningrad Conservatory, now St. Petersburg Conservatory. Found inside the bench of a concert grand piano in the Great Hall, the letter was written on conservatory letterhead with pencil that had faded to gray. The envelope was addressed to Dmitry Volkov, Tashkent State Conservatory, Uzbek Soviet Socialist Republic, but was never posted. 15th February, 1942, Leningrad State Conservatory. My dearest Dmitri, your piano still plays, though my fingers have forgotten how to be warm. I write this in the great hall where we used to perform together, where your hands and mine would dance across the keys in perfect harmony, creating something beautiful out of the cold morning air. The Bechstein Grand sits exactly where we left it on that September morning when they put you on the train to Tashkent with the other faculty evacuees. Its black surface is now covered with a thin layer of frost that never melts, and my breath forms small clouds as I lean over the keys. But it still sings, my love. Even with ice crystallizing on the strings, even in this hall, where the temperature never rises above freezing, your piano still remembers how to make music. Today, I played our Schubert, the Fantasia in F minor that we premiered together last spring when the world still made sense, and the greatest worry in our lives was whether Professor Glazunov would approve of our interpretation of the opening movement. Do you remember how we argued about the tempo? You wanted it more urgent, more passionate, while I insisted on letting each phrase breathe with the melancholy Schubert intended. Today, I played it your way, Dmitri, urgent and passionate, because melancholy is a luxury I can no longer afford. In this city of the dying, music must be defiant, or it is nothing at all. There were 7 people in the audience, 7 souls, who crawled out of their apartments and through the snow-blocked streets to hear something other than the sound of artillery shells and their own hunger. Mrs. Petrova was there. You remember her? The elderly woman who used to bring us tea during our evening rehearsals. She sat in the front row wrapped in every coat she owns, her thin hands folded in her lap, tears freezing on her cheeks as I played. It does not, of course. Nothing sustains us now except stubbornness and the occasional miracle of art. I have lost so much weight that my hands look like bird claws on the keys. The rings you gave me, your grandmother's wedding band, and the little emerald for our engagement slide off my fingers now if I'm not careful. I keep them on a chain around my neck, close to my heart, where I can feel their small weight against my ribs. The other day, I caught sight of myself in the mirror of the practice room where we used to work on our Bach inventions. For a moment, I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. Hollow cheeks, enormous eyes in a skull-like face, hair that has lost its shine and falls out when I brush it. I have become a ghost of myself, Dmitri, a specter haunting the conservatory where we once lived and loved and created beauty together. But then I sat down at the old upright piano in that practice room, the one with the C-sharp that always stuck, remember? And I played our Bach, the 2-part invention in D minor that you said was like a conversation between lovers. I played both parts, your melody line and mine, weaving them together as we used to do, and for those few minutes I was whole again. The piano doesn't care that I am starving. The music doesn't notice that my dress hangs on me like a shroud. When I place my hands on the keys, I am still the woman you married, still the pianist who can make dead wood and metal strings sing with life. Do you know what I think about while I play? Not the cold, though my fingers are so stiff I can barely move them. Not the hunger, though my stomach cramps constantly and my head swims with weakness. Not even the fear, though the German artillery grows closer every day and we all know they mean to starve us into submission. No, when I play I think about sound itself, about how miraculous it is that pressing these keys can create waves in the air that enter our ears and somehow become emotion in our hearts. I think about how music is just mathematics made beautiful, how the same laws that govern the movement of planets also determine why a major chord sounds joyful and a minor chord sounds sad. I think about how in a city where nearly everything human has been stripped away, warmth, food, safety, hope, music remains, pure and eternal and untouchable by war. Yesterday, I played for a group of children from the orphanage on Nevsky Prospect. 43 children whose parents have died of starvation or been killed in the bombing. They sat on the floor of the small hall, bundled in whatever rags they could find, their eyes too large in their small faces, their bodies too thin to be called healthy. I played them Chopin's Minute Waltz, and something extraordinary happened. Despite their hunger, despite their grief, despite living in a world where childhood has become a crime against survival, they began to smile. Some even clapped their hands in time with the music. For 3 minutes and 30 seconds, they were just children listening to a pretty song. When I finished, a little girl, she couldn't have been more than 6, raised her hand like she was in school. "Please, miss," she said, in a voice like rustling paper, "do you know any dancing songs?" My mama used to dance with me in our kitchen before she went to sleep forever. I played every waltz I could remember, Dmitri, Strauss and Chopin, and even that silly little piece you composed for my birthday 2 years ago. I played until my frozen fingers could barely move, until the children began to drift away into the gathering darkness, back to their orphanage, where they would huddle together for warmth and dream of dancing with mothers who would never wake up. That little girl was the last to leave. She walked up to the piano on legs like matchsticks and touched the keys with one finger as if they might be magic. "Will you be here tomorrow?" she asked. "Yes," I promised her. "I'll be here tomorrow." It was the first promise I've made in months that I wasn't sure I could keep. The cold is the worst part, worse even than the hunger. It seeps into your bones and stays there, a permanent ache that no amount of clothing can ease. I sleep in the conservatory now. There's no fuel for heating my apartment, and at least here I can burn sheet music for warmth. I'm sorry, my love, but I burned our copy of the Moonlight Sonata last week. I had memorized it anyway, every note, every phrase, every delicate tremolo in the final movement. The irony wasn't lost on me. Burning Beethoven to stay warm enough to play Beethoven. I've made a nest of sorts in the storage room behind the stage, surrounded by old instruments and music stands. There's a violin here with a cracked soundboard, a cello missing 2 strings, a trumpet dented beyond repair. They keep me company, these wounded instruments. We are all casualties of this war. all struggling to make music despite our damage. Sometimes at night, when the shelling stops and the city falls into that terrible silence that means death is walking the streets, I hear phantom melodies coming from these broken instruments, ghost songs played by ghost musicians for an audience of shadows. Perhaps I am going mad, Dmitri. Perhaps starvation and cold and loneliness have finally driven me beyond reason. But if I am mad, it is a musical madness, and I find I can bear it. I received a letter from you last month, smuggled in with a food convoy from the mainland. You wrote about the warmth in Tashkent, about the concerts you're giving for evacuated Leningraders, about the Uzbek melodies you're learning and incorporating into your compositions. You sound well, my darling. You sound alive and creative and hopeful. You also sound very far away. I know you want me to find a way to leave, to somehow get passage on one of the evacuation trucks that cross the frozen Lake Ladoga. Come to me, you wrote. Leave that frozen tomb and come where there is food and warmth and a future for us both. But I cannot leave, my love. Not yet. Not while there are still people here who need to remember what it feels like to be human. Not while there are children who need dancing songs and old women who need to cry over Schubert and broken instruments that still have songs locked inside them. Someone must stay to play the music. Someone must remain to prove that beauty has not been driven from the world entirely. Do you remember what Professor Glazunov used to say about our responsibility as artists? Music, he would tell us, is not entertainment for the wealthy or decoration for the comfortable. Music is bread for the soul, and the soul can starve as surely as the body. The souls in this city are starving, Dmitri. Every day I see people who have given up, who walk through the streets like automatons, who have forgotten that they were ever anything more than animals focused on basic survival. They shuffle past with dead eyes and vacant expressions, and I know that something essential has been eaten away by the hunger and cold and fear. But when they hear music, real music, played with love and skill and the full conviction of the human heart, something flickers back to life in those dead eyes. They remember that they once danced at weddings, sang lullabies to their children, hummed while they worked in gardens full of flowers. They remember that they are more than their suffering. This morning, I played Bach's Goldberg Variations in the lobby of the Astoria Hotel, where they've set up a temporary hospital for the worst cases of dystrophy. Doctors and nurses moving between beds of skeletal patients, all of them too weak to lift their heads, most of them dying slowly of starvation. I thought music might be cruel in such a place, a reminder of life's pleasures offered to those who will never enjoy them again. But one of the nurses, a woman about my age whose hands shake constantly from hunger, asked me to play something peaceful. They're afraid, she whispered. They're all so afraid of dying. Maybe music will help them remember that death is not the end of everything beautiful. So I played the most gentle variations, the ones that sound like conversations between old friends, like memories of summer afternoons, like lullabies for souls preparing to sleep. And I watched as the tension left those emaciated faces, as breathing became easier, as some indefinable peace settled over that room of the dying. When I finished, the silence was different. Not the terrible silence of despair, but the sweet silence that follows a prayer. One of the patients, A man so thin I could count his ribs through his hospital gown, beckoned me over with a movement so small I almost missed it. When I leaned down to hear him, he whispered, "Spasibo." Thank you, in a voice like wind through dried leaves. He died that afternoon, the nurse told me later, but he died with that music in his ears. Died remembering that the world once contained beauty and might contain it again. I think that is why I stay, my love, not from stubbornness or misplaced heroism or inability to face the journey across Lake Ladoga. I stay because someone must play the music. Someone must remind the dying that they once danced, the grieving that they once sang with joy, the hopeless that they once believed in tomorrow. The piano is more than wood and wire and ivory keys. It is a bridge between the world we have lost and the world we might yet regain. Every note I play is an act of faith, a declaration that beauty will survive this war, that love will outlast hatred, that the human spirit is stronger than the forces trying to crush it. You are part of this too, even though you are thousands of miles away. When I play our duets alone, I hear your part in my mind, feel your presence beside me on the bench. You play with me still, my darling, across all the distance and time that separates us. Your hands guide mine when they grow too weak. Your voice encourages me when I want to give up. Your love sustains me when nothing else will. We are still making music together, you and I, still creating something beautiful out of the raw materials of memory and hope and the stubborn refusal to let art die in a dying city. The concert grand in the Great Hall needs tuning badly. The cold has pulled some strings sharp, left others flat. But I play it anyway, coaxing what harmony I can from its damaged voice. We are alike, that piano and I, battered by circumstances beyond our control, functioning despite our wounds, still capable of song even when song seems impossible. Tomorrow I will play again, for Mrs. Petrova and the orphan children and the dying patients, and anyone else who finds their way to the conservatory. I will play until my fingers are too cold to move, until my strength gives out entirely, until the music itself carries me beyond the reach of hunger and cold and fear. And I will think of you, my beloved, safe and warm in Tashkent, creating new music while I struggle to preserve the old. I will imagine our reunion someday when this nightmare ends and we can sit together again at our piano, 4 hands and 1 heart, making the kind of music that reminds the world why it is worth saving. Until that blessed day, I remain your devoted wife, playing for 2, loving for both of us, keeping the music alive in a city that has forgotten how to sing. With all my love and what remains of my strength, your Katarina. This letter was discovered along with sheet music for numerous classical pieces, annotated in the margins with performance notes in a shaking hand. According to conservatory records, Katarina Volkova died of starvation on March 3, 1942, 16 days after writing this letter. She was found at the piano in the Great Hall, her hands still positioned on the keys. Dmitry Volkov returned to Leningrad in 1944 after the siege was lifted. He found his wife's body preserved in the conservatory's basement morgue and had her buried in Piskaryovskoye Memorial Cemetery, along with hundreds of thousands of other siege victims. The piano, she mentions, the Bechstein Grand, was restored after the war and is still used for concerts today. On the anniversary of Katarina's death each year, a concert is held in her memory. The program always includes the Schubert Fantasia in F minor, played as a duet by two conservatory students. A plaque beside the piano reads, "In memory of those who kept music alive in the darkest hours." Lost letter. The bread ration tastes like sawdust, but I call it cake. This letter was discovered in 1985 during a renovation of a communal apartment building on Vasilyevsky Island, Leningrad. Found wrapped in a child's drawing and hidden behind a loose brick in the kitchen wall, the letter was written on pages torn from a school notebook with pencil worn down to a stub. The envelope was addressed to Vera Petrovna Smirnova, Evacuation Center, Vologda region, but was never posted. 1943, Vasilyevsky Island, Leningrad. My dearest sister Vera, the bread ration tastes like sawdust, but I call it cake. Today is little Alyosha's 7th birthday, and I have made him the most magnificent birthday cake you can imagine. 3 layers of the finest flour, sweet buttercream frosting, and 7 bright candles that cast dancing shadows on our kitchen walls. He clapped his hands when he saw it, my darling boy, and his eyes grew wide with wonder like they used to when he was small and the world was full of magical surprises. At least, that is the story I am telling him, and myself. And you, dear sister, though I know you will see through my fairy tale to the bitter truth beneath. The cake was his daily bread ration, 125 grams of dark, gritty stuff that barely deserves the name of bread. I shaped it into a little round with my hands, smoothed it as best I could, and stuck a splinter of wood from our broken chair into the top for a candle. When I lit it, the flame danced bravely in our cold kitchen, and for just a moment it looked almost festive. "Make a wish, my little rabbit," I told him, using the pet name that always makes him giggle. "But don't tell me what it is or it won't come true." He squeezed his eyes shut so tight, his whole face wrinkled up, thought very seriously for a long moment, then blew out the candle with all the ceremony of a prince at a royal feast. The smoke curled up toward our ceiling, carrying his secret wish into whatever heaven still watches over starving children in besieged cities. I think I know what he wished for, Vera. The same thing I wish for every night when I tuck him into bed beside his sisters, when I listen to their shallow breathing in the darkness and count each breath like a prayer answered. He wished for what we all wish for: enough food to fill his belly, enough warmth to stop the shivering, enough safety to sleep without fear. But he is 7 years old, and 7-year-olds believe in magic. So perhaps he wished for something grander. Perhaps he wished for his papa to come home from the front, or for the war to end, or for the chocolate factory he remembers from before to start making sweets again. Or perhaps, and this breaks my heart to think it, perhaps he wished simply to see his mama smile the way she used to, before hunger carved hollows in her cheeks and worry drew lines around her eyes. I try so hard to smile for them, Vera, even when my stomach cramps with emptiness, even when the cold seeps through our broken windows and turns our breath to frost, even when I count and recount our food supplies and know we are always one day closer to having nothing at all. The children must not see their mother despair. They must not know how thin the thread is that holds us all above the abyss. So I tell them stories while we eat our meager meals. Grand tales of feasts and festivals, of tables groaning under the weight of roasted meats and fresh bread and bowls of fruit that glistened like jewels. I describe birthday parties with real cakes, tall, sweet towers covered in cream and berries, with enough candles to light up a room. Tell us about the cake Aunt Vera made for your birthday, Mama, Katya asks. She is 9 now, old enough to remember fragments of the time before, but young enough to hunger for the fairy tales I weave around those memories. So, I tell her about your famous honey cake, the one with 7 layers that took you 2 days to make. I describe how you beat the eggs until they were fluffy as clouds, how you measured the honey with the same precision a chemist uses for medicine, how the whole apartment smelled like a bakery when it was baking. I don't tell her that the honey came from Papa's beehives in the country, or that the eggs were from chickens that probably ended up in German cooking pots, or that the flour came from wheat fields that are now battlegrounds. I tell her about the taste, sweet and rich and complex, with layers of flavor that revealed themselves slowly, like music that grows more beautiful the longer you listen. I tell her about the texture, soft and moist and perfect, the kind of cake that melts on your tongue and makes you close your eyes with pleasure. And as I speak, I watch her face transform. Her hollow cheeks fill out in my imagination. Her dull eyes brighten with the reflected memory of better times. She licks her lips as if she can taste that phantom cake. And for a moment, she is not a half-starved child in a besieged city, but a little girl at a birthday party, surrounded by love and abundance. "Will you make me a cake like that when the war is over, Mama?" she asks. "The most beautiful cake in all of Leningrad, I promise her, with roses made of sugar and your name written in pink frosting." These are not lies I tell my children, Vera. They are hopes. They are acts of faith in a future that sometimes seems impossible, but which I refuse to abandon. They are the difference between survival and surrender, between keeping our humanity and becoming animals fighting over scraps. Young Misha, who is 11 and thinks he is very grown up, sometimes rolls his eyes at my stories. He has begun to understand too much, has started to see through the elaborate fiction I construct around our daily struggle. But even he will pause in his skeptical examination of our feast to ask about the time when Papa caught that enormous fish in Lake Ladoga. "Tell about how big it was, Mama," he says, though we both know the only fish we've seen lately were the frozen ones they sometimes distribute with the rations, small bony things that provide more hope than nourishment. So I spread my arms wide, describing a fish the size of a young shark, a creature so magnificent that Papa needed help just to pull it from the water. I tell them about how we cooked it over an open fire on the beach, how the smoke drifted up into the white night sky, how we sat around eating and laughing until the sun came up again, and as I speak, I can almost smell the wood smoke, almost feel the warmth of that impossible fire, almost taste the sweet flesh of that mythical fish. The story becomes real in the telling, and for those few minutes, we are not a starving family huddled in a cold apartment, but adventurers on a camping trip, explorers discovering new lands, people who have never known anything but joy and plenty. After Alyosha finished his cake this morning, he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Such a grown-up gesture from such a small boy, and announced that it was the best birthday cake he had ever tasted. "Even better than the one Babushka made me last year?" I asked, though we both know that last year's cake was also bread ration, though perhaps with a tiny scrape of jam I had saved for the occasion. Much better, he said solemnly. This one tasted like. He paused, searching for words that his 7-year-old vocabulary couldn't quite provide. Like happiness. Out of the mouths of babes, as they say. Perhaps that is the secret ingredient I have been adding to our poor meals all these months. Not sugar or butter or any of the things that make food delicious, but happiness. The kind of fierce, desperate happiness that a mother summons from the deepest wells of love when her children need to believe that the world still contains sweetness. The other mothers in our building think I have gone a little mad. They watch me through their doors when I sing lullabies in the hallway, when I play games with my children that require us to pretend we are dining in the finest restaurants of Moscow, when I spend precious minutes telling elaborate stories instead of focusing solely on the grim business of survival. She lives in a fantasy, I heard Mrs. Kozlova whisper to Mrs. Fedorova yesterday. It's not healthy for the children. They need to understand the reality of our situation. But what is reality, Vera? Is it the gnawing hunger that never leaves us, the cold that penetrates to our bones, the constant fear that tomorrow's ration will not come? Is it the sound of artillery in the distance, the sight of bodies on the street that no one has strength to move, the knowledge that we are slowly starving in full view of the world? Or is reality the love that keeps us alive when our bodies should have given up long ago? Is it the strength we find to smile at our children, to sing to them, to create small moments of joy in the midst of horror? Is it the stories we tell that remind us who we were before this siege began, who we might be again when it ends? I choose the second reality, sister mine. I choose the reality where my son's birthday cake is magnificent, where our evening meal is a feast, where my children go to sleep not just with empty stomachs, but with hearts full of the certainty that they are loved beyond measure. Is this madness? Perhaps. But if so, it is a madness that keeps my children's spirits alive when their bodies are failing. It is a madness that teaches them that human beings are more than just animals fighting for survival, that we are creatures capable of creating beauty and meaning even in the darkest circumstances. Yesterday, little Alyosha drew me a picture. He used the last stub of a pencil and a piece of paper torn from one of his school notebooks. Precious resources that we normally save for more practical purposes. But he wanted to draw, he said, because he had something important to show me. The picture shows our family sitting around a table laden with food. There are bowls of fruit and platters of meat, baskets of bread and bottles of milk. We are all smiling, all healthy and well fed, all together in a world where abundance is normal and hunger is unimaginable. But the most beautiful part of the picture is not the food. It is the expression on the faces he drew, especially his own face, which beams with such joy that it made me cry when I first saw it. This is how he sees our life, Vera. Not as a series of desperate struggles to survive another day, but as a celebration where love is the main course and hope is always served for dessert. I have hidden his drawing behind the loose brick in our kitchen wall, along with this letter you will never receive. Someday, when this siege is over, when normal life returns to our city, I will take them out and show them to my children. I will say, look, here is proof that even in the darkest times, we never forgot how to dream. Here is evidence that love really can transform bread rations into birthday cakes, that a mother's stories really can nourish the soul when nothing can nourish the body. The children are sleeping now, curled together under every blanket and coat we own. Their breathing is shallow but steady, and in their sleep they smile sometimes, as if they are dreaming of the feasts I describe, the adventures I invent, the happy endings I promise them every night. I know you worry about us, dear sister. I know you lie awake in your evacuation center, wondering if we are still alive, if the children are suffering, if I am strong enough to keep them safe until this nightmare ends. I know you feel guilty for leaving, for taking the opportunity to evacuate when I chose to stay behind with my family. Do not feel guilty, Vera. You did the right thing, the sensible thing. You saved yourself, so that when this is over, there will be someone left to remember how we used to live, someone to help us rebuild not just our city, but our capacity for joy. But know this, we are not just surviving here in our frozen city. We are living. We are celebrating birthdays with bread ration cakes. We are having dinner parties with water soup. We are creating memories that will sustain us long after our stomachs are full again. Today, my youngest son turned 7 years old, and he had the most wonderful birthday party. There was cake and laughter and stories and love. So much love that it filled our small apartment and spilled out into the hallway, warming our neighbors and reminding them that there are still reasons to smile. The bread ration really does taste like sawdust, sister. It is gritty and gray and barely digestible. But when I place it in front of my children and tell them it is cake, when I light a splinter of wood and call it a birthday candle, when I sing happy birthday in a voice cracked with cold and hunger, in that moment it becomes cake. Love is the yeast that transforms whatever we have into whatever we need. Love is the sugar that sweetens the bitterest meal. Love is the flame that lights the darkness, even when that flame is nothing more than a mother's imagination and a splinter of wood from a broken chair. My children are rich in love, Vera, even if they are poor in everything else. They go to bed each night knowing that they are cherished, that their mother would move mountains to keep them safe, that no matter how hungry they are, they will never starve for affection. Perhaps that is enough. Perhaps that is everything. The candle I am writing by gutters and threatens to go out. Soon I will have to save what is left for tomorrow's stories, tomorrow's pretend feasts, tomorrow's small celebrations of the fact that we are still here, still fighting, still capable of finding reasons to smile. But before I go, let me tell you about the cake I will make for Alyosha next year. It will be 3 layers high, covered in white frosting, and decorated with real flowers. There will be 8 candles, one to grow on, and they will burn so brightly that their light will be visible from space. We will invite all our friends and neighbors. There will be music and dancing and enough food for everyone to eat until they are truly satisfied. The cake will be so sweet that children will remember its taste for years afterward, so beautiful that grown-ups will take photographs to preserve the memory. And when Alyosha makes his wish and blows out the candles, his secret dream will come true immediately right there at the table, surrounded by everyone who loves him. That is the cake I am already baking, sister, in the kitchen of my imagination. That is the party I am already planning in the calendar of my hope. The bread ration tastes like sawdust, but I call it cake. and someday it will be. Your loving sister, Lydia. This letter was discovered along with a child's drawing of a family feast and several other documents hidden in the wall. According to building records, Lydia Smirnova and her 3 children survived the siege. They were reunited with Vera Smirnova in 1944, after the siege was lifted. Alyosha Smirnov became a baker after the war, eventually opening his own shop in Leningrad. Neighbors remembered that he was known for making elaborate birthday cakes for local children and that he never charged families who couldn't afford to pay. He lived until 1995, often telling customers about the magnificent birthday cake his mother made him during the siege. The drawing mentioned in the letter is now part of the collection at the Museum of the Defense of Leningrad, displayed alongside other artifacts from the siege. A note beside it reads, "Love was the ingredient that transformed bread into cake, survival into celebration, despair into hope." Lost letter. I draw maps of streets that no longer exist. This letter was discovered in 2014 during restoration of the Academy of Arts building in St. Petersburg. Petersburg. Found inside a leather portfolio hidden beneath floorboards in what had been a drafting room, the letter was written on architectural paper with technical ink that had faded to sepia. The envelope was addressed to Professor Mikhail Antonovich Petrov, Moscow Institute of Architecture, but was never posted. 27th January, 1944. Leningrad Academy of Arts. The day the blockade was lifted. My dear Mikhail Antonovich, I draw maps of streets that no longer exist. Today marks exactly 872 days since the Germans closed the ring around our city, and as I write this, I can hear celebrations in the distance, church bells ringing, people singing, the sound of joy echoing through neighborhoods that have known only silence and sorrow for so long. The blockade is broken, my friend. The siege is over. But the city I am documenting in my drawings is not the Leningrad that existed before September 1941, nor will it be the city that rises from these ruins. It is something else entirely, a ghost city, a collection of memories made manifest in stone and rubble, a testament to what was lost and what, God willing, might yet be recovered. I sit surrounded by blueprints and elevation drawings, technical sketches, and restoration plans, all spread across tables in this bombed-out studio where we once taught students to appreciate the classical proportions of Rastrelli's Baroque facades. Half the ceiling has collapsed, letting in snow that never melts, and my ink freezes in the bottle if I don't keep it close to the small fire I maintain in what used to be a waste basket. But I draw. Every day, through the worst of the siege, through the hunger and cold and bombardments, I have continued to draw. Not from life, too much of life here has become death, but from memory, from photographs when I can find them, from the architectural surveys we conducted in the 1930s when preservation seemed like an academic exercise rather than an act of desperate salvage. I draw the Anichkov Palace as it stood before the bombs found it, with its elegant windows and decorated pediments intact. I sketch the Catherine Palace at Tsarskoye Selo, reconstructing from memory the intricate details of the amber panels that German soldiers stripped away like vandals, looting a tomb. I map the streets of the old city, marking where buildings once stood, where gardens once bloomed, where the careful urban planning of 3 centuries created spaces that made the human soul feel larger. These are not mere technical exercises, Mikhail Antonovich. Each line I draw is an act of faith. Each measurement I record is a prayer. Each detail I capture is a promise to the future that beauty once existed here and might exist again. Do you remember when we were students together at the Institute, how Professor Volkonsky used to say that architecture was frozen music? How the proportions of a classical facade were like the mathematical relationships in a Bach fugue, creating harmony through the precise ordering of space and form? I understand those words differently now. Architecture is not frozen music. It is music that can be silenced, harmony that can be shattered, beauty that can be destroyed by men who understand nothing of what they are destroying. But it is also music that can be remembered, harmony that can be reconstructed, beauty that can be reborn if there are people willing to preserve the score. That is what I'm doing here, my friend. I am preserving the score. Yesterday, I spent 6 hours documenting what remains of the summer garden. Do you remember how we used to walk there on Sunday afternoons, discussing Leblanc's sculptural program, debating the influence of Versailles on Russian garden design? The lime trees that once formed perfect alleys have been cut down for firewood. The marble statues that survived the iconoclasm of the Revolution have been damaged by shrapnel, their classical faces scarred by the fragments of modern warfare. But I measured and drew and recorded anyway. The basic structure of the garden remains. The paths that create the geometric framework, the canal that defines the northern boundary, the iron fence that Yuri Felton designed to separate paradise from the everyday world. The bones of the design are still there, waiting for new flesh. I found fragments of one of the sculptures half buried in snow, a piece of drapery from one of the allegorical figures, carved with such skill that, even broken and discolored, it retained the capacity to move the heart. I held it in my hands, hands that have grown thin and weak from 2 years of near starvation, and I could feel the ghost of the artist who carved it 2 centuries ago, feel his confidence that beauty was worth preserving, that future generations would treasure what he had created. Was he wrong, that long-dead sculptor? Have we proven that beauty is not worth preserving, that human beings will always choose destruction over creation, vandalism over art? Some days I think so. Some days, when I walk through the ruins of the Gostiny Dvor, or see what shells have done to the facade of the Hermitage, I wonder if we are not simply deluding ourselves. Perhaps human civilization is just a thin veneer over barbarity. Perhaps our cities and monuments and carefully planned public spaces are just elaborate sandcastles waiting for the tide to wash them away. But then I return to my drawings, and I remember why I continue this work. Last month, while documenting the damage to St. Isaac's Cathedral, I encountered a group of children playing in the rubble around the construction scaffolding. They were thin and pale, these children of the siege, dressed in layers of adult clothing that hung on their small frames like costumes in a play about survival. But they were playing, creating games out of broken stones, inventing stories about the damaged building, finding wonder in the midst of destruction. One little girl, perhaps 7 years old, approached me as I worked on my elevation drawings of the cathedral's dome. She watched me draw for several minutes, with the focused attention that children bring to adult mysteries. "What are you making?" she asked finally. "I'm drawing the church," I told her, "so that people will remember how beautiful it was." She studied my drawings with the seriousness of a critic examining a masterpiece. "Will they fix it?" she asked. "Will they make it beautiful again?" "I hope so," I said. "That's why I'm drawing it." She nodded gravely, as if this made perfect sense to her. "My mama draws too," she said. "She draws pictures of our old apartment, the one we had before the bombs. She says drawings help you remember. From the mouths of babes, as they say. Drawings help you remember. But more than that, they help you believe that what is remembered can be restored, that what was beautiful once can be beautiful again." I think of that child often as I work. She represents the future I am drawing for, not the present generation, who have seen too much destruction to fully believe in reconstruction, but the generation that will inherit whatever we manage to preserve of our cultural memory. They will walk through the restored palaces and gardens. They will attend concerts in rebuilt halls. They will study in libraries filled with books that survived the siege or were carefully reprinted from salvaged copies. They will take for granted the beauty that we are fighting so desperately to preserve, and that is as it should be. That is what we are working toward, a time when architectural beauty is once again taken for granted, when the careful planning of public spaces is seen as normal rather than miraculous, when children can play in gardens without dodging shrapnel from the sky. The technical challenges of reconstruction are immense, Mikhail Antonovich. How do you rebuild the amber room when the original amber has been scattered to the winds? How do you restore frescoes when only fragments remain? Paintings when the canvases have been damaged beyond conventional repair? How do you recreate the subtle proportions of a Rastrelli facade when the original building exists only in photographs and memory? These are not merely questions of craftsmanship, though craftsmanship will certainly be required. They are questions of philosophy, of what we mean when we speak of preservation and restoration. Are we trying to recreate the past exactly as it was, or are we creating something new that honors the memory of what was lost? I have been studying the Japanese concept of mono no aware, the pathos of things, the bittersweet awareness of the impermanence of all beautiful things. Perhaps what we are creating here in Leningrad will carry that quality. The restored buildings and gardens will be beautiful, but they will also carry within them the memory of their destruction, the knowledge that beauty is fragile and must be consciously protected. The scars will show, I think, not literally. Our craftsmen are too skilled for that, but metaphorically. The rebuilt city will be haunted by the ghost of its former self, shaped by the knowledge of what was lost and what it cost to recover even a portion of it. I have been working closely with a team of archivists who spent the siege years protecting documents and photographs in the basement of the academy. They tell remarkable stories of preservation under impossible conditions. Scholars who risk their lives to save architectural drawings, librarians who shared their bread rations with mice to prevent them from eating irreplaceable manuscripts, curators who slept in the hermitage to guard paintings that had been removed from their frames and rolled up for protection. These people understood something that the destroyers did not, that culture is not luxury but necessity, that the preservation of beauty is not vanity but survival, that human beings cannot live by bread alone. They need music and art and the ordered spaces that architecture provides. One of these archivists, an elderly woman named Katarina Mikhailovna, showed me a photograph of herself taken before the war. She is standing in the Catherine Palace, surrounded by the amber panels that made the room famous throughout Europe. She is young and elegant, dressed in the style of the 1930s, smiling with the confidence of someone who believes that beautiful things will endure simply because they are beautiful. The woman who showed me this photograph bore little resemblance to the young woman in it. 2 years of siege had aged her decades, carved lines of grief and determination into her face, taken away the comfortable assumption that beauty would preserve itself. But her hands, when she handled the photograph, were steady. Her voice, when she described the room as it had been, was clear and strong. She has made herself into a living archive, a repository of memory that no bomb can destroy, no army can capture. They took the amber, she told me, but they could not take what I carry in my mind. Every panel, every detail, every play of light across the golden surfaces, it is all here. She tapped her temple with one thin finger, and someday we will use what is here to bring it back. This is the spirit that drives our work. Mikhail Antonovich. Not nostalgia for a lost past, but determination to create a future worthy of what we have inherited. We are not museum curators preserving dead artifacts, but gardeners planting seeds for a harvest we may not live to see. The practical aspects of this work would amaze you. We have learned to make ink from soot and water, to create drawing paper from materials I will not specify, because they were too precious to waste on explanation. We have measured buildings by candlelight, recorded details while shells fell around us, preserved photographs in containers that also served as cooking pots when food was available to cook. But perhaps most remarkably, we have learned to see beauty in ruin itself. The broken dome of a church, silhouetted against a winter sky, has its own stark magnificence. The empty windows of a palace, framing views of a garden grown wild, create compositions that no architect planned, but which speak to something deep in the human heart. I do not romanticize destruction, my friend. Too much has been lost, too many lives sacrificed, too much beauty reduced to rubble. But I have learned that even destruction cannot entirely destroy the human capacity to find meaning in disorder, to create new forms of beauty from the fragments of the old. My drawings reflect this understanding. They are not merely technical documents, but artistic interpretations, attempts to capture not just the physical reality of these buildings, but their spiritual significance, their role in creating the spaces where human culture could flourish. When I draw the facade of the Winter Palace, I am not just recording the dimensions of windows and the spacing of columns. I am trying to capture the sense of grandeur that those proportions were meant to create. The way the building's scale makes the human visitor feel both small and elevated, both humbled and inspired. When I map the streets of the old city, I am not just creating a guide for reconstruction, but a meditation on how urban planning can create community, how the arrangement of buildings and public spaces can encourage the kinds of human interaction that make civilization possible. Each drawing is a small act of faith that these spaces will exist again, that future generations will walk through them and feel what we felt when we first encountered them, that the careful work of centuries of architects and planners and craftsmen will not be lost to the barbarism of a single war. The work continues, even as the celebration of our liberation echoes through the city. Tomorrow, I will return to my drawings, my measurements, my careful documentation of what was and what might be again. There are palaces to resurrect, gardens to replant, public spaces to reimagine for a generation that has learned the true value of beauty through its temporary loss. I draw maps of streets that no longer exist, my friend, but I draw them with the confidence that they will exist again. Different, perhaps, scarred by memory, certainly, but beautiful still, and worthy of the sacrifice that preserved them. The ink in my pen flows freely today, the first time in months that it has not frozen. Perhaps this is a sign, a small symbol of the warming that is coming to our wounded city. Spring will arrive eventually, and with it, the work of rebuilding will begin in earnest. When that day comes, we will be ready. The plans will be drawn, the measurements recorded, the vision preserved. What was destroyed by hatred will be restored by love. What was scattered by war will be gathered by peace. What was forgotten in the chaos of survival will be remembered in the quiet work of reconstruction. I draw maps of streets that no longer exist, but I draw them for the day when they will exist again. Your faithful colleague, Pavel Ivanovich. This letter was discovered along with hundreds of architectural drawings and photographs documenting wartime damage to Leningrad's historic buildings. According to Academy records, Pavel Ivanovich Volkov supervised major restoration projects throughout the 1940s and 1950s, including work on the Catherine Palace, the Hermitage, and numerous churches damaged during the siege. Many of his wartime drawings became the foundation for post-war reconstruction efforts. The sketch of the Admiralty spire mentioned in the letter was found with the document and is now displayed in the Museum of the Siege of Leningrad. Volkov died in 1987 at the age of 89, having lived to see most of the buildings he documented during the siege fully restored. His funeral was attended by hundreds of architects, craftsmen, and cultural officials who credited his wartime preservation work with making the restoration of Leningrad's architectural heritage possible. A plaque in the Academy of Arts reads, "In memory of those who preserved beauty in the darkest hours, who drew maps of hope when hope seemed impossible."